Zombie Wasp, like most of the heroes and villains of her dimension, was infected with a mysterious alien virus that turned them into flesh-eating demons. She made her first appearance in the pages of Ultimate Fantastic Four number 22 back in 2005. She comes from Earth 2149, but her origins prior to the infection was very similar to the Janet we all know and love from the Prime Marvel dimension Earth 616. This all took a drastic change though one awful day when a zombie version of the hero called the Sentry arrived to the planet. He then proceeded to infect the Avengers with the virus, instantly turning them into powerful undead who began biting and slicing into the flesh of all nearby humans. While it is not directly explained how or who infected her, homegirl Janet was one of the first to become a zombie, where she also went and bit her husband Hank, aka Giant Man. At first trying to hide the bite like a typical moron in a Walking Dead episode, Hank's infection was discovered by Black Panther, only for Giant Man to knock the Wakandan warrior unconscious, where he dragged him to his basement and put him on ice to save as a backup snack for when he turned. Later on, we see Janet and the other Avengers members snacking on poor Jarvis, where they are joined by a freshly zombified Giant Man. As they bit down on their poor former butler, Wasp and the gang decided to give in to their hellish desires and sought to infect as many heroes as possible. They then turned on the Avengers Mansion's alert system, sending out a bogus SOS message for all heroes to report there. Those who responded to the trap were either devoured or turned, adding more and more to the super zombie army. Nick Fury would assemble the non-infected heroes he could find, where he mounted an assault on the zombies, but sadly the power of the virus was too great, and the majority of Earth's heroes were turned into cannibals, and thus the vast majority of the population was turned into a very bloody lunch. Without much food left, Zombie Reed Richards would put his rotting brain to use, and would construct a dimensional portal that would allow the zombies to escape to other worlds. After a scuffle with the Ultimate Dimension's Fantastic Four, our savage lad Magneto would use his powers to get the Four back to their world and destroy the machine, locking him and the zombies on Earth 2149 for the rest of time. After awakening from the explosion, Mags would be surrounded by a rather hangry and angry zombie crowd who were out for revenge on the dude for shutting up the space snack cabinet. Despite being completely exhausted, Magneto proved just how powerful he was by summoning waves of shrapnel, tearing into the skin of countless undead as he tried to make his escape. After slicing off part of Colonel America's head, decapitating Hawkeye, and bringing an entire skyscraper down on the Horde, it would appear Magneto would be victorious. That is, until we see our girl Wasp sneak up in shrunken form right next to the guy, and then proceeded to bite a huge chunk out of his neck. God, that looks painful. As much as we'd like Wasp to bite us on the neck, I don't think we'd imagine it quite like this. Overjoyed by his wife's success, Hank Pym demanded for he and Janet to shrink down and share the large piece of Magneto meat together, only for the woman to tell her husband to get lost, for a piece this big could last her for days alone in her shrunken form. She then flew off as Hank and the others then pounced on the immobilized Magneto, completely consuming the former X-Men villain. After their early Thanksgiving dinner, the gluttonous gore bags could feel their hunger returning and debated on what to do now that their food supply was nearly extinct. They then decided to meet in the middle of New York to formulate a plan, while Giant Man told the gang to go on ahead of him so he could find his dear wife Janet. However, as we know, this version of Hank could completely care less about Janet and was off to some rather sus activity, while Wasp in secret tailed her husband to see just what he was up to. We then see Hank go down the dark, creepy stairs to his dark and creepy lab, where he opened up a coffin-like device, where we see the unconscious Black Panther from before, who he'd been storing here as an emergency snack. We then see the madman bust out a saw where he legit slices off T'Challa's foot and begins to snack on it. As he remarks on how delicious the taste of flesh was, Hank was then rudely interrupted by Wasp, who was furious at her man for hiding this delicious chocolate Wakandan snack from her. Demanding to know why Hank was being so selfish, the scientist told her that she lacked the restraint when it came to feeding and would have gobbled up poor T'Challa in less than a day, while he was much more dignified and needed to strategically snack on the man himself. Firing her energy blast at her husband, Janet demanded for Hank to share the goods, only for him to grow in size and smack his wife into the wall, telling her that she cannot hurt him. Wasp then decided to go with good old blackmail and told Giant Man that she would tell the other heroes what he was doing, only for him to hide the truth by grabbing his wife and proceeded to bite her head right off its zombie body. Hank then threw Janet's lifeless body to the side, spit out her head, and then vomited all over the ground due to the horrid taste of her undead flesh. Without much grub left, the zombies thought they would go hungry forever, until their prayers were answered in the form of the Silver Surfer, who arrived to the planet to announce the arrival of Galactus, who was coming to consume it. Eyeing the zesty spaceman up and down, the gang attacked, resulting in a bloody battle that poured into the city streets. Giant Man, seeing that this fight was a bit past his power grade, sat this one out and watched until the Hulk entered the scene and bit the Surfer's head clean off. Jumping into the fray, Hank and his homies then chowed down on the Surfer, where they realized they got his powers, and then promptly used them to roast their fellow zombies into undead rotisserie chickens, where they proceeded to eat them. As the cannibal cookout commenced, we see a wounded Black Panther carrying the decapitated, but still very alive head of Zombie Wasp as the pair made their way through the decimated New York streets. It is revealed that good old Janet had actually helped rescue T'Challa from his prison and asked for a nice fleshy food repayment. You know, just like a finger or something. No big deal. Disgusted at this request, Panther firmly told the head no, and that there was nowhere for this food to even go, bringing him to the conclusion that this hunger was all within the mind of its victims. The dynamic duo were then approached by the remaining followers of Magneto, and after a rather intense first encounter that involved one of the dudes getting his jugular bit out by Wasp, the group realized that they were all on the same side and allowed the two to come aboard their ship, Asteroid M, for salvation. It is here that Wasp was introduced to the group's head scientist Reynolds, who was fascinated at the undead specimen. He then took the Wasp head to study to hopefully create a potential cure for the rest of humanity. During this time, the cosmic-powered zombies had finished polishing off their friends, where they were then met by Galactus, who was not too thrilled about the boys eating his Employee of the Month. This then kicked off another ferocious battle, which resulted in the zombies combining their powers into one blast, which sent the Titan tumbling to the ground, where they then gobbled him up as well. It was after this giant-sized feast that the undead realized that they had leveled up once more and got Galactus's powers, where they then set off for space, devouring every planet's citizens that they could find. We then fast forward 5 years later, where we see Black Panther, the remaining mutants, and Wasp, in a now sick robot body, make their way back to the planet after sensing that the undead were gone. Confirming that the zombies had indeed left the Earth, Janet, T'Challa, and the rest then decided to rebuild what was left of society, where they constructed a new palace called New Wakanda. The gang then spent a rather nice and non-cannibalistic 40 years of peace, rebuilding what they could of humanity, that is until a hot-headed mutant extremist leader, Malcolm Cortez, for some reason thought he could do a better job ruling over the scraps of humanity left over than T'Challa could. Gathering a group of fellow crazy, and most likely racist zealots, The group then organized an assassination attempt on Panther, which left him disemboweled and nearly gone. Knowing that there was hardly any time left, Zombie Wasp came to the aid of her king and blasted the would-be assassin aside. Seeing that he was almost done for, Janet then took drastic action and bit into Panther's neck, infecting him so he might be saved. After this first taste of flesh after over 40 years, Wasp's uncontrollable hunger returned, where she then turned her sights on T'Challa's wife, only to get grabbed and slammed into the wall by a freshly zombified king who told her to leave his wife alone. To keep their hunger at bay for the moment, T'Challa and Wasp then decided to eat the assassin, much to the horror of T'Challa's wife, who watched the whole ordeal happen. Poor lady, almost got stabbed and eaten twice, all in the same night. She'll, honestly, probably never get a good night's sleep ever again. Deeply disturbed at what he had just done, Black Panther ordered for he and Wasp to be locked in the Wakandan vaults so they could fast until their hunger vanished. After getting to spend a few weeks of quality time with her new partner king in crime, Wasp and T'Challa were released from their confinement and went to confront Cortez for the whole assassination thing. That is, until they were met by the super zombies who had made a surprise trip back to Earth. You see, after all this time, the zombies had pretty much ate everything in the universe, but conveniently remembered that there was a dimensional portal back on Earth that would allow them to access other dimensions. So they made a pit stop back home, only to see that there were some remaining tasty little appetizers to sink their teeth into. Wasp's lovely ex-husband Hank, in his infinite wisdom, then proposed turning the settlement into a human breeding program so the zombies would never run out of food again. Thinking this was too evil even for them, this then caused the likes of Spider-Man and Luke Cage to rebel, causing mass infighting among the zombie horde. During this battle, a much older and much shinier-headed Reynolds then activated Wakanda's defense shield, locking the hostile zombies out and keeping Wasp and the others in. Swearing to come back and unalive everyone, the other zombies flew off in search of the portal, while the others had their wounds tended to by Forge and Reynolds. Forge then reveals that he had actually taken the portal from the Fantastic Four's building years ago, and that it was at Wakanda this whole time. Knowing that the zombies would be back, the group prepared for war, but that wasn't until Wasp and Reynolds had announced that they had been in love after all this time. God, how does that even work? I mean, she's a zombie head on a robot body, and he's an old... you know what? I don't even want to think about it. Let's just have Reynolds have his W on this one, boys. Just as intended, the zombies returned for their treasure, where they went to war with Panther and the rest. During this battle, Wasp came face to face with her husband Giant Man, where she told him that she was not too thrilled about the man biting her head off all those years ago. Not being much of a match though, Hank then literally clapped back by clapping poor Janet's head to a nice zombie stew. The zombies would then manage to fight their way inside the compound and would go to gobble up the remaining humans. That is, until they realized their hunger, like Wasps, had vanished after going without meat for so long. Lowering their weapons, the zombies went to make amends. That is, until a zombie Hulk came through and tried to eat everything in sight. This then resulted in a violent and disturbing fight that resulted in several zombies being wrecked beyond recognition. To stop the violence, Reynolds, believing his love Wasp to be dead, offered himself as sacrifice to the rampaging giant. Hulk gladly took the nice man up on his offer and ate him whole, only to realize that his hunger too had worn off, where he turned back into puny Banner, and then promptly had his head roasted by the whole squad. R.I.P. homie. After the battle, the group went to clean up the mess that they had caused. It was during this that Forge found the still alive and still very decapitated head of Zombie Wasp. So you mean my boy Reynolds died for nothing? Man, you cannot have good characters anymore." The heroes then held a funeral for their fallen brethren, and then planned a mission to use the multiversal teleporter to gather supplies to fix the world that they had wrecked. However, this ended up being another ruse by Cortez, who then teleported Wasp and the remaining zombie heroes to worlds unknown so he could claim New Wakanda for his own. These remaining Avengers would then be teleported to a world called Earth Z, which was very similar to theirs before the infection broke out. While they wished to reclaim their lives as heroes and try to make a fresh start here, the travel between realms caused their hunger to return, where they began spreading the infection to this land as well. This resulted in yet another global pandemic that left the majority of this planet either dead or infected. Wasp and Black Panther would manage to conquer their hunger yet again, where they allied themselves with this Earth's Kree warriors, where they went to war with this Earth's zombie Avengers. While their forces were great, the likes of Wasp was no match for the hungry heroes, where she was ultimately destroyed and had her brain posted on a hook as a grotesque trophy and warning for anyone who tried to oppose them.